Nicolas Maduro just dropped a statement that completely changed the rules of the game in the Americas.
Y prepararnos para ganar la soberanía y la paz en cualquier circunstancia que se presente.
While 8 U.S. warships move in carrying over 4,000 troops and hundreds of missiles, the Venezuelan dictator didn't back down. In fact, he did the opposite. Maduro made an extraordinary call for armed militias and publicly declared he's ready to destroy any American vessel that gets near his waters. This wasn't some isolated move. It's a declaration of direct confrontation between two military forces in what could turn into the biggest naval clash in Latin America in 40 years. The world has never been this close to seeing a real showdown right in America's backyard. But how many troops has Maduro really called up? And how could they possibly destroy American ships? The situation is way more serious than any headline can get across. The United States deployed an impressive fleet, 3 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers, 1 cruiser loaded with advanced missile systems, a nuclear-powered sub, and 3 amphibious ships carrying Marines. That's more than 8 military vessels moving through waters close to Venezuelan territory, something the region hasn't seen in decades. On the other side, Caracas fired back with a mobilization that even surprised international military analysts. Maduro didn't just call millions of civilians into militias. He also reinforced the border with Colombia with thousands of regular troops, activated drone patrol systems, and put the entire Bolivarian National Armed Forces on maximum alert. Now, you might be wondering, do these numbers really matter? The difference between a show of force and real prep for confrontation lies in the details that few media outlets highlight. Let's dig into the data that shows the real scale of this operation. Let's get to the concrete facts that make this situation different from any symbolic show of power. The U.S. officially claims this operation is about fighting drug trafficking, specifically what they call the Cartel de los Soles, an organization that, according to Washington, has direct ties to the Venezuelan government. The American ships are carrying around 500 troops, including 200 Marines specialized in amphibious operations. Among the ships identified are the USS Iwo Jima, USS San Antonio, USS Fort Lauderdale, plus the destroyers USS Gravely, USS Jason Dunham, and USS Sampson, the USS Lake Erie, a guided missile cruiser, and the USS Newport News, a fast nuclear attack sub. Round out this naval power display, Venezuela, in turn, announced the mobilization of 4.5 million civilian militia members, on top of regular troops already stationed strategically. It's important to understand these numbers mean an unprecedented military escalation in the region since the 1980s. But numbers alone don't tell the whole story. To really get what's going on, we have to look at the timing of this operation. In geopolitics, timing is never coincidence. And what we've uncovered about the motivations behind this mobilization goes way beyond what governments admit publicly. The timeline of events reveals a lot about the motivations behind this operation. Trump came back to the presidency in January 2025, and one of his campaign promises was to step up actions against Latin American drug trafficking. In August, his administration doubled the bounty for info leading to Maduro's capture, raising it to $30 million. The naval operation officially kicked off at the end of August 2025, lining up with growing diplomatic tensions between the two countries. The U.S. government says this is the biggest anti-drug operation ever carried out in the region. But international analysts question if the real goals go way beyond fighting trafficking. Venezuela's response was immediate and calculated. Maduro didn't just mobilize military forces. He also sent a formal letter to the UN asking for diplomatic intervention against what he calls an American military intervention attempt. It's a smart political move. It casts Venezuela as the victim of international aggression in front of the world. This political escalation leads us straight to a key question. What are the main players in this crisis actually saying? Nicolas Maduro's words over the last 2 weeks turned this from a naval operation into a potential international crisis. In a televised speech, the Venezuelan president declared word for word, no empire will set foot on the sacred soil of Venezuela. But he went further. Maduro said he's ready to take the country into an armed struggle if invaded, putting the nation into a special period of maximum preparation. Those aren't just political soundbites, they're a rhetorical escalation that could have devastating real-world consequences. The Venezuelan president also made specific claims about U.S. military capabilities, saying that 200 U.S. troops are prepared to invade Venezuelan territory. That's a direct accusation that ramps up diplomatic tensions between the two nations. But political rhetoric is one thing, actual military capability is a whole different story. To figure out if this is a political bluff or genuine prep for conflict, we need to break down the strategies and military resources both countries have put in play. The U.S. naval formation isn't just impressive, it's carefully calculated. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers are equipped with Aegis systems, capable of intercepting missiles and coordinating precision strikes. The cruiser USS Lake Erie has ballistic missile defense capability, while the nuclear sub USS Newport News can stay submerged for months without detection. The amphibious component of the operation, with the USS Iwo Jima, USS San Antonio, and USS Fort Lauderdale, shows rapid troop landing capability. These ships can carry helicopters, armored amphibious vehicles, and establish a beachhead on coastal territory in just hours. The Venezuelan strategy is fundamentally defensive, but with deterrence elements. Mobilizing millions of civilian militias represents a prolonged popular defense doctrine, making any territorial occupation extremely costly for an invader. Maduro also reinforced the border with Colombia, a U.S. ally, prepping for possible coordinated ground operations. But this isn't just about two countries. The Caribbean and all of Latin America are being pushed to take sides in this growing polarization. How the neighbors of both nations react could decide whether this stays bilateral or turns into something much bigger and more complex. The situation in the Caribbean isn't just about Venezuela, and the U.S. countries like Colombia, Brazil, and Guyana are in a tight spot, pressured by both Washington and Caracas to pick a side. Colombia, a longtime U.S. ally, is letting its territory be used as a logistics base for regional ops. Brazil, under different geopolitical pressures, is officially keeping neutral, but is closely monitoring the situation because of its long border with Venezuela. Cuba and Nicaragua have already publicly backed Maduro, while Pacific Alliance countries quietly line up with the U.S. This regional polarization could turn a bilateral conflict into a continental crisis. This regional complexity forces us to ask the question everyone's avoiding: where could this actually lead? Based on historical precedents and the current balance of forces, we can sketch out realistic scenarios for the coming weeks. And some of these scenarios are more worrying than others. Let's break down the most likely ones. Based on history and the current setup, containment operation, most likely. U.S. ships keep patrolling international waters, intercepting suspected trafficking boats, while Venezuela keeps its forces on alert without direct confrontation. Over time, tensions ease through informal diplomatic channels. Controlled naval incident. A more aggressive interception leads to a clash between Venezuelan patrol boats and U.S. vessels. Warning shots. Evasive maneuvers. But no major casualties. This kind of incident can be spun politically by both sides without real military escalation. Escalation by miscalculation. A badly handled interception leads to casualties. For example, if U.S. troops landed in Venezuelan territory during a rescue op or while chasing traffickers, it could trigger an automatic Venezuelan military response. Regional confrontation, least likely, but possible. Direct U.S. military action against Venezuelan facilities could activate regional defense treaties, pulling in other countries and turning the bilateral conflict into a hemispheric crisis. But there's something most analysts aren't openly talking about, and it might be the single most important factor of all. Behind all this military posturing, there's an economic reality that explains a lot about both sides' true motivations. Let's look at the numbers you rarely see in the headlines. Behind this military tension lies an economic reality that affects millions of people. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world, over 300 billion barrels. This natural resource is both the country's biggest strength and its biggest strategic weakness. U.S. sanctions have already wrecked Venezuela's economy, slashing oil production from 3.2 million barrels a day in 2013 to under 800,000 today. Any military escalation could completely cut off production, impacting global energy prices. Instability also disrupts Caribbean trade routes, through which millions of tons of goods move every year. International insurers have already started raising premiums for ships crossing the region, a clear sign the private sector is seriously worried about how this unfolds. These economic factors lead us to the technical aspects that most worry international security experts. Military analysts have flagged 3 aspects of this crisis that make it especially dangerous. First, the asymmetry of forces could push Venezuela toward unconventional confrontation strategies like sabotage, cyber warfare, or activating cells inside U.S. territory. Second, the fiery rhetoric on both sides has built up public expectations that may force military action even when diplomacy would be the smarter move. When Maduro talks about armed struggle and Trump promises to use all his power against drug trafficking, they both box themselves into fewer diplomatic options. Third, the Caribbean region is extremely crowded at sea, with heavy commercial routes, fishing boats, and tourist traffic. Any incident involving civilians could turn a limited military op into a humanitarian disaster with global political fallout. Meanwhile, in the halls of international diplomacy, a careful dance of positioning is playing out. How other nations react to this crisis could decide whether it stays regional or blows up into something with truly global implications. And the reactions we're seeing reveal a lot about the current state of international alliances. The international community's reaction has been cautious, but telling. The European Union expressed concern about the military escalation and called for dialogue, while China and Russia, longtime Venezuelan allies, are keeping strategically silent, watching how things play out before taking a public stand. The Organization of American States is split between countries backing the U.S. position and those calling the naval operation a violation of regional sovereignty. This hemispheric split could have long-lasting consequences for regional cooperation. No matter how the current crisis ends, the UN Security Council hasn't been formally engaged yet. But diplomats say there are already intense informal talks going on in its halls. Venezuela has signaled it may call for an emergency session if things keep escalating. But maybe you're wondering, how does all this connect to regular people's everyday lives? The truth is, geopolitical crises like this have ripple effects far beyond the Caribbean, shaping economies, migration, and even the price you pay for gas. Let's break down those real-world impacts. This crisis isn't just some faraway international headline. The potential fallout directly impacts millions of people across the Americas. First off, any extra instability in Venezuela could speed up migration flows into neighboring countries, hitting already stressed regional economies. International fuel prices are directly tied to crises in the Caribbean, especially when oil-producing nations are involved. American and European consumers could see gas prices spike if things escalate. On top of that, this crisis tests the committees of international organizations and hemispheric security treaties. The outcome could set precedents for future regional conflicts and the effectiveness of multilateral institutions in preventing armed confrontations. We're watching one of the most significant geopolitical crises in the Western Hemisphere since the Cold War. 8 U.S. warships, millions of Venezuelan militia members mobilized, and fiery rhetoric on both sides push this way beyond a simple anti-drug op. The next few days will be crucial. Any naval incident, badly handled interception, or rhetorical escalation could turn this show of force into a real confrontation with lasting regional consequences. One thing's for sure, the Caribbean is no longer just a tourist paradise. It's now the epicenter of a crisis that could redefine hemispheric relations for decades. When thousands of troops, hundreds of missiles, and millions of civilians are mobilized in such a small region, the margin for miscalculation is dangerously thin. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over, and its outcome could shift the global balance of power for years to come.